Hey, good morning, everybody. Welcome back to Jan's beautiful gallery here in Summerland, British Columbia. One of the most important things for all film workers, especially the prop department, set decorating department, are taking care of our contacts. We would be nowhere without all the people we've built relationships over the course of our career. They've learned to trust us. They've opened their stores after hours. They've come in on Sundays. They've done everything they could in their power to help us succeed as a prop department. Yes, it's a business and they are in the business of making money. But at the end of the day, the ability to build a long-term relationship with a contact is the most important thing. And that means keeping your word, no matter what you say, even if they're not there. Such was the case on the movie Passchendaele, where I was tasked with finding some British artillery for the film. And I found myself heading back to Shiloh, Manitoba for that. And I dealt with the War Museum, the Artillery Museum in Shiloh on Legends of the Fall. Here's a story from my book about that. After my experience with the artillery on Legends of the Fall, I wanted to get on it early. We did not need German artillery this time. It would be Canadian artillery troops with British cannons. On Legends, we rented a couple of pieces from the Royal Canadian Artillery Museum in Shiloh, Manitoba. It had been 14 years since that film when I picked up the phone and called the museum's director, Mark George. I explained why I was calling and mentioned Legends of the Fall, noting that it was before his time at the museum. There really isn't anything that is not on display available, he replied rather coolly. Realizing I wasn't getting anywhere on the phone with him, I said, "These are historical artifacts, and this is not something we should try and work out over the phone. Can I come see you?" When he agreed, I told him I would be there in a couple of days. I landed in Winnipeg on an incredibly humid day. When I got to the rental car counter, I discovered that the office had rented me a subcompact for the 2-hour drive to Shiloh, which is near Brandon. The car was the same size as a semi-truck tire. When I got onto the highway, I discovered that the car did not even have cruise control. Who rents a car with no cruise control on the prairies where the highways have no turns for 1,000 miles? As I drove east on Highway 1, the radio reported tornado warnings. Great, I thought. I'm going to die in a tornado on a highway in Manitoba in a subcompact with no cruise control. I managed to make it to CFB Shiloh, where I had lunch with Mark George. He showed me around the museum and I told him he could set the parameters for what it would take to rent the artillery for filming. By the time I left the museum, I had made a deal to have a British 18-pounder, a howitzer, and a large German trench mortar transported to Alberta for the film. On top of that, I hired Mark and another of his staff to be our technical advisors on the days we filmed with the guns in Alberta. They would supervise the loading in Manitoba and then fly to Calgary to supervise the unloading. I rented a shipping container to store them on site when they were not used. I also said I would never take the cannons out of the container without one of them being present. One day when that vow was put to the test was when I was asked to make the cannons available for a shot. I can't do that without the museum guys here, I said. When I was asked how would they know, I said I would know, and I gave them my word. The person who asked me completely understood, and we rescheduled the shots and flew the museum guys in a few days later. The artillery shots in the movie were done by the 2nd Unit. We made replica brass casings for loading and casings for post-firing as well. At the end of the film, we paid the rental fee and shipped the cannons back. When I called Mark, I told him I needed an invoice for him and his assistant's time in Alberta. He seemed surprised, as he thought the rental fee included his and his assistant's time as well, as they had had a wonderful time on set. "I'm glad you had a great time, but I had money in the budget to pay you," which we did. I also left them a list of questions to ask if they were ever approached by another production that wanted to rent their artifacts. I did not want this positive experience with me to make them think that all shows were the same in terms of how contacts were treated. The thing about the contacts is we are nothing without them, and you have to keep your word. You always have to keep your word. Have a great day, everybody.